Hi, John Baker here. I'd like to share with you my experience of changing the rony brackets on my Challenger 2. We've all seen the bulletins, and I've received a lot of phone calls from people wondering about the rony brackets, about tightening the bolts, the inspection process. And I did a little research, and I found out that other than what's written in the build manual, which says to tighten the two bolts finger tight that hold the strut, or if you want, you can put lock nuts on it. I personally don't think that's a good idea, and I did not do that. I stayed with the original setup with the castle nuts and the special lock pins, and also to only tighten the rony bracket to the airframe snugly. So, what does snugly mean? Well, snugly means, in the real definition, that the parts are in intimate contact. They have 25 inch-pounds, okay, not feet, 25 inch-pounds of torque on it, and it doesn't crush or distort the tube. Here is my version of how I did it. To inspect the brackets, we could take them to a non-destructive test shop, and we could have them dye penetrant test them, as they're aluminum parts. So we could do it that way, or as suggested, use a 10 times magnification. I do that with a set of loops, jeweler's loops, I guess we call them. They came from Princess Auto in a big set, and this is the 10 times viewer. You can wear it this way, or you can use it in your hand and just look through it. It's entirely up to you. This is one of the Wingspar rony brackets. I've wiped it clean completely all the way around. I don't want any dirt on it when I inspect it. I'm going to inspect my lift strut rony bracket. First thing I see is, yes, there is a little discoloration, a little, maybe you want to call it an abrasion around the bolt hole where the fastener goes across through the lift strut. And I expect that because I have not over tightened the bolt. So I expect that it has moved in there a little bit, and I consider that to be absolutely fine and normal. Move along here. Come on the back side. Now, they look white on here, but they're actually, it's where the surface finish is worn off, the coating is worn off. I use a high lift kit on it, so that's why it fits very wide on the back side here. And we're going to keep going around. It gives it a lot of support. And what do we see? Same on the other side. So here we go. I'll just spin it around. So again, we have a little, what I call a little abrasion around the bolt hole for the bolt that goes through the lift strut, and that's because the bolt's not over tightened and it can actually turn, which again, I think is just fine. Now, inspect the ends. You notice the reflection from the light, so I'm trying to use that as part of my inspection process. Where'd it go? There we are. And I don't see any cracking there. So we'll look on the inside. Okay, so that long area right there, that's from where the lift strut actually moved on the bracket, because it's not over tightened and it can actually move a little bit. We'll move along through here, check in the center, where this is the side that you can see when it's on the aircraft, and I don't see any issue with that. And again, there's a little bit of abrasion around the hole because, again, it's not over tightened, so it can actually move a little bit like it's supposed to. Switch to the other side, and here we go. So there's another longer abrasion there from the lift strut. So for me, I would not put this back on because it has these abrasions on it. The surface coating is worn through. It already has 370 hours on that bracket of float use and ski use, and I think that that's probably enough for that one. Is it cracked? No, I don't see any cracks in it whatsoever. I think that with the wear I see on it, I just wouldn't bother putting it back on. I would just buy a new one. They're not that expensive. Let's go ahead, and we're just using 2 wrenches. We don't need a fancy torque wrench to do this. So I'll tighten it a little bit because it's close. I'll go a little bit again. Oh, there's only a little teeny bit of movement there now. And I can just barely hear it click and feel it move. So just a little bit more. You notice I hardly even moved the wrench. So the difference is, if you can see the nut, here's the difference. Rattling, and this is how much. Okay, no rattle, but I can still feel it move just a little bit. Go a little bit more. Okay, now I have no movement there, and I only went a little bit. Now, to me, I consider this to be an intimate contact because of the fact that, does it still turn? Yes. Can I make it move? Now that I've rotated it a bit, let's seat it all in. Okay, I can feel the slight little bit of movement there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go a very slight bit again. You see I hardly move that nut. Okay, oh, definitely intimate contact now. I'll rotate them again a little bit. And yes, absolutely no free play in there. So that's what I consider to be an intimate contact. Now I mentioned that it would be so that we don't crush the tube, which we're not supposed to do. It says right in the Challenger instructions from Quad City, how do I get 25 inches of torque? Just going to use the wrench on the other side to put this flat right on the very top. Okay, so I'm going to mark this with a marker, and this will be where we're going to start at. So I mark that with a circle. Right beside it, I'm going to mark it with an X. And to actually get 25 inch-pounds, and I've checked it with a torque wrench, so I know it works, is I'm going to hold this steady so it can't turn from the other side. I'm going to use my wrench, and I'm going to go one flat more. That's it. So here's the close-up of that. There's the circle just off to the right and the X on the top, and the X was just off to the left before. So I only tightened it one flat, not one turn, not anything else, one flat where the wrench goes on. That's it. The cross bolt that actually holds the left strut on, it still moves around in here because that's what I wanted for my demo. And let's measure across the bracket. And I would say that's 2 inches, 355 thou. So my opinion is that these shouldn't be crushed in any way, pushed in. I'm going to hold this with one at one end, and I'm going to tighten it up until it's finger tight. So I think that finger tight would be right there. Okay, I'm not using any wrenches. So, do we think that it moved it in at all? Did it crush it a little bit? Let's have a look and see. 5 thou. Okay, so now we're at 350 thou. So now I put the pin in and I lock it up the way it should be. And look, it still turns, which is fine. I haven't crushed the bracket, I mean, for 5/1000 of an inch, using the other method with the Nylon nut instead of the castle nut. This is not my preferred way to do it. So we're going to start it again. See the same bracket. It's 2 inches, 355 thou across. Now the bolt's rattly. Of course, I need wrenches for this. So to me, this is starting to get into the point where we can have an issue because it's so simple before with the nut, with the castle nut. So I have to hold it and keep turning a little teeny bit more. See, I'm just turning it ever so slightly because I don't want to crush this bracket at all. Squeeze it and stress it out. So you can see how little I'm turning this. All right. Well, I don't know. It's, well, it still turns. Feels about the same as it did with the castle nut on it. Okay, so it's a little bit less pinched because it's only a couple of thousandths of an inch. I had to really guess at that to get that right with the wrenches, and that's why I just don't like that way of doing it. Again, you use whatever hardware you want and do it whatever way you want. It's just I wanted to show that this seemed to be much simpler. Hold it, tighten it on, put the pin in, and you're done. This, when you start to lose some feeling of what you're doing, is when I don't like it. Go one flat more, which is a very small error, and see how much it squeezed it. Look at that. a lot. Okay, so it's 15 thousandths of an inch pinched in from where we started at. And look, I can still move it. I can still turn it. To me, this just doesn't seem like a very accurate way to do it. And again, totally my opinion. I'm not an engineer. I'm not an airframe mechanic. I'm just a guy that owns a Challenger and does his own maintenance. I have no intimate contact. Now, it's not going to take much to tighten this up to get rid of the play. I can just barely, see, I didn't move it very much. I had it almost tight all the way, but not very much. So let's move it a tick more. Okay, I would call that intimate contact. I can't find any movement, feel any movement in it. Let's move it around a little bit the same way we did before on the root tube and see if there's any, maybe there was a burr somewhere or something. Nope, that's exactly where I want to have it. So I'm going to take my wrench on the inside. I think this method would work very nicely on an X series plane because it's a lot harder to get at the fastener, the nut on the inside at the rear position. So again, it's the same deal here. I got the flat at the top. I'm going to make a circle on it. I'm going to make an X off to the left just to remind me visually, because I only want to move it one flat, which will give me my 25 inch-pounds of torque. Okay, oh, wrong way. I'll do this so we can see this better. I'm holding it on the inside, and there I go right to there, to the top. I made a few thousandths of a squeeze on the tube, which again, it says in the instructions, don't squeeze the tube, deform the tube. This is the way my airplane originally came. It's a 2004. They did not have the high lift kit in it, so this is the stock configuration. The recommendation from everyone that I see now is to put the high lift kit in, which goes here and also on the inside, comes with all the hardware. You really should have that on your Challenger. There's just no doubt about it. This video that I put together here really is just my opinion. Remember, I'm not an engineer. I'm not an airframe mechanic. I'm just a guy that loves to fly, and this is the way I did it. And hopefully maybe this will help somebody. And again, you're free to do this any way that you want to do it. This is just the way I did it. So that this is not over tightened through the airframe, that bolt, squishing any part of the airframe. We don't want to do that. And so that I went with the original concept with the castle nut and the pin, so that it was very, very difficult for me to squish the bracket in. We don't want to squish the bracket in. Now, if you were really paying attention, you'll notice that the hole is a long ways out in the castle nut, and that's because this hardware is just hardware that I had kicking around. It's all used. It's only for demonstration purposes. The whole point was the tightening procedure through this whole video is what I wanted to try and get across. And again, so that we don't squish anything, we don't squish the lift strut, we don't squish the bracket. This bracket has, I think I said earlier that this bracket will withstand in a straight pull. From what I've told, 5,000 pounds, and the bolt going through the longeron and through the root tube aircraft bolt should do 125,000 pounds. I think the tensile or the yield on it is probably 110,000 pounds. So don't have any concern with this bolt breaking. I don't have any concern with this bracket cracking through any installation that I did by pinching it. I will, of course, go with all the recommendations and maintain my aircraft the way it should be, and I'll inspect these brackets on schedule when they're supposed to be inspected. And of course, if I had a really hard landing, the plane was out in some real severe wind, tied down, rocking and rolling, yeah, I'm going to look at these brackets for sure. It's not, in my opinion, because there's anything wrong with it. It's just basic safety. If the plane's had some abuse or abnormal service, then absolutely I should be looking at everything that I can see. And now that all of this is all noted with the Rony brackets, and it's very common knowledge, everybody has the notification of it. Thanks for watching.